The main character is typically the protagonist or hero of the story. He's also the character that experiences the greatest amount of change throughout the story and the story arc. The change that a character, typically the main character, experiences throughout the story is the character arc. The greater the change that the character experiences, the greater the arc, and typically the more interesting the story is. A universal trait is an element of a story that appeals to a very wide and large audience. Many humans feel that they're the only ones to experience suffering or love, but when they're experiencing a visual story, then they can be reminded that a lot of these traits are universal throughout society. Since the story is all about the main character, the protagonist, supporting characters either assist the main character in achieving his goal or actually stand as additional obstacles. You have a couple different types of supporting characters. There's a sidekick character, there's a perspective character, or an antagonist. I would say that for any decent story, all main characters, yes, definitely do change, but not all characters in a story change. A mentor character, for instance, can stay pretty static because they're the holder of knowledge and training another character. So not all characters change, but the main ones definitely do. An obstacle character is any character that stands in the way of the protagonist or main character achieving his or her goal. So the antagonist is typically the main obstacle character, but again, characters don't always have to be people. So an obstacle character antagonist might be a mountain that someone's trying to climb. Mentors provide spiritual and physical guidance and training to the main character. The mentor characters are typically older, not parental characters, and they really assist that main character in a pivotal point in their arc. You could call the hero character the main character or the protagonist. Many times the sidekick plays the hero's conscience. The sidekick's main kind of part in the story is to assist the main character in trying to achieve his goal. But at pivotal points in the story, the sidekick oftentimes can come in and make the main character kind of question his morals and really have to evaluate his decision making process. So I'd say the sidekick is the character that plays the conscience. Conflict is one of the most absolutely essential portions to any interesting story. It does two things. It immediately engages the audience, and it also forces the characters to confront an obstacle, some type of change that they have to that has to ensue. It's defined as when two forces meet with mutually exclusive goals, which I love that definition. Tension is experienced by the audience when conflict is looming, and you can have all types of different tension depending on how the story is told and the conflict. But the greater the looming conflict and the longer the build up, then the greater the tension potentially. Motivation is simply the reason behind a character behaving a certain way. The more believable the character's intentions, or the more morally right the character's motivation is, then the more connectedness the audience has with it, and then therefore the more believable. Characters need to be forced to change because people typically need to be forced in order to change. So storytellers will craft the story in such a way that characters have to choose between change in order to preserve their goal and their way of life or losing everything. Storytellers achieve this by crafting the story in such a way that the characters lose all other options as choices. So the only one that they're left with is the kind of the change that will make them, or rather the choice that will make them kind of embrace the most amount of change. The stakes are what the main character stands to lose within a particular story. So the audience can derive meaning from the stakes based on kind of what those stakes are. The higher the stakes, the more that character stands to lose. And so the audience can derive that that's a very meaningful set of decisions, or that's a meaningful kind of portion of the character arc. Audience members make very deep connections with the main character, especially the more aligned that main character's kind of moral stance is to their own. So stakes are very important and are very meaningful when they're based on the main character's kind of moral code, because that's what the audience member connects to. The highest stakes for an adult typically is death. So, in a like, kind of horror or sci-fi thriller kind of genre, then the stakes are very intense, typically because they're death. Now, in other types of genres, the stakes don't necessarily have to be as intense. So, I would say yes, the intensity of stakes definitely changes throughout genres.